Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for a few minutes of fun. Having a few minutes of fun today with some backgrounds, big surprise. Putting some texture paste, probably mostly, through stencils. Checking out a couple of different paper surfaces, working with sprays, because they do take differently on different things. So I've got some, I think that might be smoothie card. Oh no, it's just the back of a piece of card that came in an envelope. Using that up. These are on some cheap watercolor paper, and you can see I've already put a bit of texture paste through. These are my usual manila tags, very similar to the Ranger manila tags that used to be. They now have distressed heavy stock, and these came from a stockist that is now no longer existent. This is some bamboo paper, bamboo sketch paper, again from the cheapy shop. Comes in a pad, big book of bamboo sketchbook, it says. And yeah, I don't know how this is going to work. It feels quite absorbent, so I have a feeling the inks are going to sort of disappear into it. A couple of different texture pastes, bunch of different stencils, some of them Tim Holtz, some of them PaperArtsy. So this is the Ranger Opaque texture paste, and it's scrumptious stuff. I've also got the PaperArtsy Grunge paste on the table, also scrumptious stuff. You could also do this with a heavy gesso or a gel medium. I just want some texture to let my sprays play amongst. I might also do a bit of work with some acrylic paints. I've got the PaperArtsy Fresco Finish Chalk Acrylics around, and I'm thinking sort of springtimey colours still, even though it is currently snowing onto my daffodils and tulips. Little bit frustrating after the glorious spring weather we've been having, but that's what happens here in the Czech countryside. Even all the way through April and sometimes into May, you can't trust that there won't be frost, snow, the whole 9 yards, as they say. No idea whether that's golf or American football or what it might be. The whole 9 yards. I'm sure somebody will help me out. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you're as... I'm not sportingly ignorant. I'm not going to say that. There are sports of which I am anything but ignorant. But American football and golf are sports of which I am ignorant. So I'm going to try that same stencil. I'm going to go for that same stencil, but this time onto this bamboo paper. And it's just to set myself up some experiments. Compare and contrast to see how the paper responds. The paste, probably, there won't be any difference. The paste will go on, the paste will dry. But it's when one comes to apply the inks that you really notice the difference between different papers. And it's always worth, if you're not getting results that make you happy, or if I'm not getting results that make me happy, the first thing I'll experiment with is changing my paper surface. Because even though it might be the same weight as something you've used before, it might be saying it's made of the same stuff, you can never guarantee that it's going to have the same kind of surface on it. It might have a slicker surface, a smoother surface. Do I want another of these? I think I probably want at least one of these with the Grunge paste. The Grunge paste has a sort of clayey, like in the manner of clay, a clayier texture and finish than the Ranger one. It's neither better nor worse. It's a different effect, and just depending on what mood I'm in on any given day or what kind of look I'm after, I will choose my materials accordingly. Or, as today, I'll just do some experimenting with both, get myself a bunch of backgrounds as I do it, and be carrying out scientific experiments as I go. I think that's probably enough of that little stencil. If you've got a little tray nearby, you can put that straight in water because you don't want the texture paste drying on it. I'm just temporarily going to give it a little spritz of water and set it aside because I will be going very shortly to deal with that. Let's see, what else do we want? There's some nice kind of spotty dotty textures. I think this might be a Kate Crane stencil, PaperArtsy. I will list everything, obviously, as usual, But because I've taken these all out of their packets, it's going to involve me doing some research this time to get the ingredients set for you, because there's a whole bunch of stencils on the table. Some of them new to me, some of them new, I think. Maybe not brand new. I could have some of my own stencils here, but I just don't seem to have those out. What else would I like? Something else on a tag. Maybe with the grunge paste through. Having a look what else I've got here. Oh, I do quite like this one here. This is one of the newer Limparella stencils by PaperArtsy, and I'm rather fond of this geometric pattern here. It's got a kind of Art Nouveau quality to it. The recent Limparella release, nothing to do with the police, had a very much an Art Deco, Art Nouveau feel to it, and this patterning, really nice. I've also just recently been, there's a new Mucha museum in Prague, painter very much of that era, some seminal works that you would recognize if you saw them, Alphonse Mucha, and yeah, it's just quite nice to tap into that. Right, setting that aside, I've kept this one because I think I might want another little bit of that lid onto that. It can sometimes help if you're not going to be using it for a while. I just put a spritz of water over the top of that. If you live in a very dry climate, you might want to put some cling film over as well. And Tim Holtz has also recently been recommending some bands that go round the rim of the lid, just to really create an airtight seal and preserve your mediums for longer. There we go. Let's have another one through there. And then, as I say, any second now, I'm going to pause, clean off these stencils, and set up with some under papers so that as I do this spraying, I don't get ink spray going in every which direction. I'm thinking the ink spray isn't going to be the end of things today, because the ink spray will take in a certain way on some of the texture paste. It will take differently on the paper in between. And one of the things I really want to explore post-spray is going to be just adding extra mediums. So we're really going to be mixing our mediums today, see what we get up to. I'm also trying to, as I said earlier in the year, use some of my more neglected goodies. So these are stencils that maybe haven't been out to play as much as others, but I thought these springtime leaves were a good one. I apologise for all the shadows being cast today. As I said, it is snowing outside. So despite it being 9 o'clock in the morning, despite all the glorious sunny days we've had, I've had to revert to some artificial light in order to be able to film today. So I don't know if you can see, but I had some grunge paste left on the palette knife there. So this one is partly grunge paste and partly the Ranger one. Let's do one more with that so that we've got plenty to spray. If I'm getting the sprays out, I might as well make sure I've got lots ready to play with, because once you start making a mess, you might as well have the ability to carry on. The texture paste, you can leave to dry, air dry. You can heat dry it. You might, if you overheat it, get extra bubbly texture, which is something, obviously, I really enjoy. So if you want a really smooth, flat surface for your texture paste, your best bet is to leave it to dry all by itself. You can heat dry it, taking care not to overheat and mostly keep your flat surface, or you can, as I frequently do, heat and heat and heat until this texture paste bubbles and bubbles and gives you scrumptious extra texture. Nothing wrong with a bit of extra texture. The tag is on the table, so I'm going to use it. And then I'll have run out of paper. So then I really will stop and clean these stencils. But as you saw, I've been giving them a spritz of water, a baking tray standing by just with some water in. You can just slide the stencils into them. You can see I'm not going right to the edges of these. That again is going to give me a bit more variation, because where the sprays hit the paper, they will do a different thing. Right, washing up time, and I'll be back to make some more mess. Turns out I did stencil some of my stony brick walls the other day, so I might just start there with, yeah, some grey. Why not? A bit of pumice stone, little spritz. You can see I've got my paper down in the background. I think this was grunge paste by the look of it. And yeah, I'm just going to get some colour onto there. Maybe a little bit of speckled egg. Don't want the speckled egg. All right, if you don't want to do that. But you can see already how some of that ink is pooling on those bricks in a really good way. I think that might just have been because it's almost empty. Speckled egg, almost finished. Let's go with some weathered wood. Okay, on you go. And you can see it's sinking into the paper in one way and just, yeah, sitting on the bricks in a different way. Just creating a sort of really nice thing at the moment. As that ink dries, that will change. This is not proper paper. This is the piece of paper that came out of some communication. So I'm not really expecting anything of that. I'm just using up the paper that was around. Let's have a go over this with some, starting out with the Distress Spray stains, which are the ink formulation. So these are transparent, translucent. They have that glow about them that is really delicious. That's Salvaged Patina. This is Broken China. So I'm just getting some of that on there. And again, let's do a direct comparison. That, I think, is the cheap watercolour paper. This is that bamboo paper I was talking about. Let's just have a look at what that will do. So just getting some colour on to start with. And these translucent inks will go on in one kind of way. Not everything is completely dry, I don't think. I think some of my texture paste is still wet. So I could give, yeah, that feels still a little bit cool, which means it's still wet. So I can give it a blast with the heat gun. I don't know whether it's because of the snow. I'm not feeling full on springtime at the moment. I'm sort of feeling the urge to get some greys and browns involved. So I might just reach for a couple of extra sprays. Rusty Hinge, vintage photo, just to mix it up a little bit. Oh, and the delicious frayed burlap. I have got some oxides, but as I say, I wanted to start with the translucents, and then we'll start getting a little more. Yeah, see, that's the zing that I'm in the mood for today. Oh, that's Rusty Hinge joining those turquoises. So let's set those just aside. And look, my underpaper already looking exciting. Let's go for a couple of these ones that I have already dried. So here is another of the translucents. That's your Broken China going on. And I don't know if you can see, that's a much duller look. So that's on the cheap watercolour paper as opposed to the bamboo. And even though that's the same colours, they're not giving me the same fire. Interesting. Or maybe I had Mermaid Lagoon in the mix last time as well. I've just picked up various colours and I'm just playing. So yeah, I will list what we've got, but it won't always necessarily be completely clear what we've got up to until I list the ingredients later. I don't know what it was today. It clearly wasn't a blue-green day. I'm sure that is to do with the sun disappearing. Having had all these beautiful sunny days where it really seemed like we were in for spring. What have we got here? Oh, that's ripe persimmon. That might be a bit much for me today, even though I seem to be in this blue-grey mood. Thought I had some hickory smoke around. Now, I've been talking about having some Distress Spray stains with their translucents, but on this paper, they're really looking much more like the Opaque Oxides, which is just reminding me that I have also got some Oxides here. And I'm just going to spatter on a bit of that for contrast. You'll get more contrast on the papers where you've got that translucence, but that's looking already quite cool. I'll come in with a bit of, this is the Tumbled Glass Oxide. The Oxides have the chalky pigment powder in, so you do need to shake those up. Distress spray stains, not so much. Not necessary to shake because there's nothing in the mixture that needs mixing. Oh, I'm already enjoying those quite a lot. Let's put them to one side. Let's get something else in the mix. So you really are leafy, so I might have to give in to greens for you. Let's see what we've got. Let's go Broken China again. And let's get some of that glorious Salvaged Patina in the mix. And let's go this time with maybe a spritz of the Tumbled Glass. So if you're spritzing with an oxide, do give it a little wipe when you're done. But you can see the chalkiness of that compared to these. That's a whole different thing that goes on. Even though on a couple of these papers we're getting a kind of chalkiness compared to some of the other papers, that really does give you something different. And when you put an ink formulation over an oxide formulation, the chalkiness will generally win out. Enjoying that quite a lot. Quite want to see what happens if we go with a zing of green. That's an oxide. Let's start again with translucence. So this is Twisted Citron. That's the leafiness. That's what I was kind of after, was to just pay homage to the fact that it is spring, even though it may not look like it out there today. It's quite weird seeing snow over the tulips and daffodils. And a bit of that. So that's an altogether moodier kind of a thing. And then the other thing, always worth doing when you've got texture in the mix, is adding a little bit of water and letting those inks go for a run. Look at that rivulet going down there. You can, of course, also add little splashes of water to the backgrounds you've already done. The inks remain water reactive, so that will change the look of what's happening. And if there's too much ink, I'm just going to help that off at that end and off at that end. There we go. That's pretty cool. Enjoying that. Let's get you in the mix. Sort of feeling bronzy. So I'm thinking if I go with some Twisted Citron and some Rusty Hinge, and then maybe a hit of, what's this? Ooh, Lost Shadow. That's a greyish, soft grey, and that's the oxide. And so I'm just putting in touches of that oxidey chalkiness in places. Might pop in a little bit of, keep losing my Salvaged Patina. That's because it hasn't got a label on it. Everything else has got a label on the lid. So now I know I should just be looking for the one without the label. Maybe that will help me to locate it. Let's put a couple of chalky bits of Broken China on here. Not with a spritz, but with a flick. There we go. And I'm just going to let that kind of do its magic. So again, lots of this will continue to happen as it dries. The inks will run into one another. They'll move and shift and blend, particularly if you give them some water to do that with. The oxides will always respond to water. They'll get a more oxidized look, a chalkiness to them. So keep playing. Playing is what I'm doing here. I'm not, as you can see, I don't really have a plan. I just want to see what happens if I mix up some stuff on these papers and get a feel for this. And along the way, I get myself some exciting backgrounds to play with in future. So this is the Oxide Twisted Citron, and that's got a real zing to the teeth. Bit of I am enjoying the Rusty Hinge today. I'm finding it hard to not put Rusty Hinge on everything. Let's go pumice stone around those edges just to get that brown. So as you can see, on some of these, the paper is really, I don't know, it's soaking up the ink and you're getting that kind of look to it. And on others, the ink is sitting on the surface and really keeping that lovely sense of glow. So it's just noticing these differences. And on some days you might want one effect, on other days you might want another effect. And it's allowing yourself to keep either a mental note or an actual physical note of the differences that you can create using different mediums, just spotting their effects on each other. Let's go in again with a hit of you. Just a little splash of Rusty Hinge onto that one, I think. Kind of enjoying how that's moving around, so I might help it a bit with some water. Let's send that ink on a little journey through the texture. There it goes, running in between that leafy stenciling. Nice. I want another of these. Again, that's running off the edges, so I might just take some of it off the edges, or you can leave it to dry. Yeah, just spotting what else is going on around the table. Let's go in with a full-on rustiness on here. And then maybe the pumice stone. And then maybe some hits of the blues and greens coming in like this to just mix in. Letting it move, you should be able to see that just kind of shifting and moving as the different ink formulations hit. And then, as I say, what I want to do is let these dry a little bit and maybe apply some gilding waxes over the top. Just playing, just experimenting. Got all these beautiful mediums, why not see what they'll do? Ooh, that went dark and moody. So that's the combination of those greys, but also really interesting I'm interested in how that again is giving me a really chalky opaque look with just those few flicks from the opacity of the chalks, of the oxides. It really has infected all the other inks. I'm always saying that. I'm always saying the oxides will win out, but it's really good to be reminded with that really clear evidence there of that kind of chalkiness. I do want a bit more blue colour on those. Let's find you. Hints of bronze will come through when you mix browns and greens and blues. You'll always get a bronziness. Sort of feeling like that might be enough for me to be going on with. Because as I say, I do want to have a play with some other kinds of mediums possibly over the top. I'm just thinking this wants a bit of extra flick of blue. So I'm going to let them do some drying by themselves. I might do a bit of heat drying, and I'm just going to sort of keep an eye out on what's happening and where I might want to add, as I do here, a little bit more vivid colour to those darks. Maybe a little bit of this to here. Fun, fun, fun. I'm going to have a spritz, I think, with one of these oxides onto these ones, because given they've gone chalky anyway, I might as well encourage that chalkiness. Grand. I'm going to let things dry a bit and then come back and see where we're at. There are lots of different ways you can highlight texture once you've got it there. Look at this. Definitely the sign of a good time, those inky fingers. If you've got gilding waxes of any kind, they will always do a good job of just hitting edges. Distressed crayons are another favourite way of mine. You can use paint and do what's known as dry brushing technique. For that, you need a fairly stiff bristled brush and you use very little paint. The key to dry brushing is minimal amounts of paint. So let's see, what colour would I like to dry brush with? Well, maybe on one of these darker ones I could hit with a bit of colour. So let's see what happens if we take something like, or maybe in many minds about what's going on today. So this is Granny Smith, and what I want to do is get some paint onto the brush, but then really get the paint back off the brush. And I'm gonna go at a 45-degree angle with my brush and just try not to put the paper down in the paint, just hit the edges of those bits of raised texture, just so that it draws the eye to them. This might not be a very good example because it's not enough of a contrast colour. What I could do it with is, oh well, I quite like it down there over those greys. That's giving me a look of sort of rustiness. It's just hitting the edges because I'm coming in at that angle and giving a bit of a hit of colour. Let's try coming in with something paler over the darker areas. This is, what's this called? Hint of Mint. And it's a very pale, cool aqua. So again, I'm going to go in, get some paint on the brush, and then really knock most of that paint off, because otherwise you just end up painting the whole thing. Let's see if we can hit some of these with a bit of a hint of mint. Anybody who caught the short, there we go, that's just hitting the edges for the most part. This texture paste is not very deep on this particular one, so it's quite hard to do this particular technique without hitting the paper underneath. Let's have a look at it over something a bit more definite. Ooh, let's try it over here. So coming in, I might actually mix those two. Let's try coming in over this. There we go. That's giving you a much better look at what dry brushing can do. Can you see how it's just hitting the edges of that? So what you also need to do with this, if you want to use it, is come in at lots of different angles, because you want to hit lots of different edges. Let's put a bit of the green in over this blue area. I've still got quite a lot of the hint of mint going on, and that's great because that's giving me a nice light highlight. In fact, let's grab a bit more of it. So coming in, wipe the bulk of it off. The stiffer the bristle on the brush, the better, really, for this. And then come in from the other direction to try to hit the other angles. That's really quite cool. The effect on that is starting to make me really happy. And the more I pull that texture into the foreground, the more the background looks deeper by contrast. Nice. Might have one last little go at that, and then we might do a bit of gilding. Let's see what happens if we hit some of these leaves. Again, trying to hit the angles, but I am actually painting the leaf surface quite a lot, and that's also fine. It's another way of highlighting the texture. But on what I'm mostly trying to do is catch edges without colouring the leaves themselves too much. Bringing those into focus. But what I'm also quite keen to do on this one is a little bit of gilding. So I've got a kind of orangey gold, and I've got a sort of aquamarine. I'm thinking I'm just going to do this with my fingertip. Going to hit some of that with some orangey gold over those areas, and then I'm going to hit with a bit of aquamarine over those central areas. And I'm just trying to keep the pad of my finger very flat. And again, not hit too much. I hope you can see that catching the light. And then with these particular gilding waxes, they used to be carried by PaperArtsy treasure wax. They're now, I'm not sure they can be shipped around the world anymore. But generally, if you give them a little shine with a cloth, then they'll start to really pick up. Quite want a little bit of gilding on this one as well, I think. Maybe the aquamarine. Again, just trying to run the pad of my finger very lightly over the top so that I'm hitting raised texture. Hee, that's cool. Again, I'm trying to catch it in the light for you so you can see the contrast as that shimmer goes on. And again, I get a little buff with the cloth. So that's the blue-green aquamarine going on there. Just creating some... Oh, I'm coming in with the gold now. Because once you get the taste for shimmer on a day, I find it tends to take over. That's a really cool surface now on there. Let's see, maybe we can do a little bit more dry brushing over here. So paint onto the brush, paint off the brush, and let's just hit the edges of some of these. Partly because I want a bit of greeniness on this one. And with dry brushing, it can also really be about layering, that sometimes you just have to take a bit of time, go back in with another layer. But the other thing you can do is, rather than trying to just hit edges, I can, again, keeping the brush quite flat so that it hits the texture, not the underside, just change the colour of this texture. You could, of course, replace the stencil over the top and be very, very specific about where you're putting colour through. That's just given me something that's a bit more interesting. Happy with that. Let's see, what else have we got? Let's get the right lids back on these. Ooh, I know. I mentioned the distress crayons. So what I tend to do with these, well, seeing that paint on the mat is just making me go, let's not waste that. Let's get a little bit of painty spatter onto a couple of these. Might as well use what's on the mat. Like so. Ooh, what do you want? I'll let you dry for a second and come back to you. Just using up paint spatter in the meantime. Let's get a little bit more water on that. There we go, that moves it around. Let's get some onto here. Good, and what I also want on here, looking at it, is a little bit of pale blue spatter, just for fun. Okay, so distress crayon, use most of that, it's not wasted. I tend to hold very upright. If you haven't been painting with them, then the surface is quite flat. So I just hold it upright and rub it over that texture. Again, just allowing it to catch edges. And you can, of course, do this with any colour of distress crayon that you like. But that's just quite an effective way of highlighting the texture that you've been creating. Very cool. What else have we got? This one's already looking pretty good to me. I don't know that I want to mess with that one very much. I like how the texture is showing up. Likewise, this one, where the colour seems to have not taken so much on that texture, and that's giving me a really clear look. On the other hand, quite liking the idea of just a bit of gilding in places. And that's catching both the background and the texture just so that we're getting those delicious shimmering highlights. There's something about the rustiness of that one that was just demanding that from me. Grand. I think I might be about done for the day, you know. Oh, look at that though. So there was just some paint left on that brush that I could see, and just taking it over those contrasting blues gives us a delicious texture on there. Let's see if that's applicable anywhere else. Oh, I wanted to have a play with, didn't I? I do feel like there's something that wants to happen here. Maybe with gilding. Maybe again just catching the edges. You can see some of that gilding paste has dried out a little bit. That's fine. Those little crumbs will actually rub quite nicely into texture, into gilding. It's quite a full-on gilding in there. So what I might do is just knock it back with the paint. This is real playtime, just layering, seeing the effects you're getting. And then again on that one, what my whole brain is crying out for at the moment is some contrasting spatter. So I think I'm going to put in a bit of paint with my spatter brush. Maybe quite a vivid paint, quite a pale paint. That's pleasing me, and I want some on there as well. And I want some on here. So again, this is about a contrast of tone, giving ourselves something light against those darks. But play, take your mediums out and play. You absolutely don't have to have the same stuff that I've been using. Use what you've got, take it out for a spin, see how they combine, see what they'll do with each other. What kinds of effects, what kinds of layers, what kinds of possibilities you've got. I was meant at the beginning of this to mention, supposed to mention once a month, the buy me a coffee option, which is below each video. If you are finding inspiration here and enjoying the content, it's deeply appreciated if you want to just buy me the odd coffee, or you can become a regular member. There are bonus levels, monthly articles, little glimpses behind the scenes, live Q&As, at various levels of that. But yes, any contribution is obviously deeply appreciated, but totally not compulsory. Thank you so much for your company. As always, I will list as many of the ingredients as I've used today that I can remember. The papers, really, it's a variety. So try out what you've got and see what kinds of effects and impacts they can have on your mediums. And happy crafting all. Sorry, no, I'm back. I just did another rough distress crayoning over these squares and enjoyed it so much that I decided I wanted a bit of vintage photo over it as well. So this is really just a rough crayoning, hitting the edges of those. And you can see how that's immediately creating shadow. And then there's a bit of excess crayon that's just appeared in places. So I just took the paper towel across it just to knock it back a little bit. But just look how that's brought those squares into relief. So I couldn't let that go because you'd have seen it in the close-up and gone, oh, that's not how it looked just now. So yeah, just that impact of just a rub of crayon over the top can be quite profound, and then you can knock it back with a fingertip, or you can just leave it in its full form. In any case, that'll do for now. Thanks so much for your company, and happy crafting all.